All right, UFC Fight Night Mexico City, Moreno versus Kavanagh, full card predictions. Not the best card. I'll try to get through this pretty quickly. But we do have UFC 326 and Risen 52 next weekend. So we've got stuff to look forward to. Like just, get through this card, try to have some good picks, try to have a good card, and then we can be on to, better and brighter things. First fight of the card, you got Wes Schultz versus Damian Pinas, which is, that's definitely a name. I'm going to go with Pinas. I think Wes Schultz might be the better fighter overall. He doesn't have the best regional career, and he did lose his first go at the Contender Series. But I do think he looked pretty good in his last fight. But I think the same thing of Pinas. I think he looked good in the Contender Series. And one thing that I liked that he had was urgency when it comes to looking for a finish. I could see him getting out-grappled in this fight, maybe being a little bit behind in the feet as far as technical tit-for-tat shit. But I think he has much better finishing potential early on. And that is how Wes Schultz lost to Mansour Abdulmalik, who I don't think is that good. Mansour Abdulmalik came out looking for a finish, eventually got it in the second round. That is the last time Wes Schultz lost. I think that this is probably a similar-looking fight. So I'm going to go with Pinas. He's also pretty young, so he's significantly more likely to have improved since his last fight, which is around the same time as Wes Schultz's last fight, because they both fought, on last season in the Contender Series. And Pinas trains with Nova União, which is Andre Pederneiras' gym, which is where Jose Aldo came up. And I think he might. I looked that up before. I'm pretty sure that Pinas is one of two Pederneiras fighters in the UFC. I think the other one's like Jafel Filho or some Brazilian. But I think Pinas improved and good finisher. I think that's what he needs to beat Wes Schultz. So I'm going to pick him to do so. He's also Aruban, which is I think he's the first UFC fighter, at least in a while, from Aruba. Next fight up the card, Erik Silva versus Francis Marshall. I'm going to go with Francis Marshall. He's a big favorite. He's 8.5 to 1 right now. There's a lot of fights in this card that are a big favorite against big underdog. I think almost every fight in this card is like 85-15, 90-10 split as far as who's picked in Tapology. But obviously I'm going to go with Marshall. Didn't look good against Bulgarian, which I think might age poorly, in people's minds, because I think a lot of people know Bulgarian from obviously the Yadier Davai fight, and people now know Yadier Davai from that fight, and then losing his follow-up fight to Jordan Levitt. But I do think Bulgarian is a really good wrestler. I think it's very clear now that fight against Yadier Davai was rigged, or there was at least some funny business going on, and I don't hate the loss against him for Marshall. And then his two other losses are against Myron Santos by a super close split decision that most people think he won. And then his other loss is to William Gomez by a super close split decision. Maybe a little bit less close, but I think a lot of people still thought he won that fight too. And then Erik Silva, just not a very good fighter. I'm going to pick Francis Marshall pretty close. I don't know why Erik Silva's in the UFC. He's 38. Why the fuck did he get signed? They signed a 35-year-old off of being a 3-0 guy in the Contender Series. Whatever. I'm going to go with Francis Marshall. Next fight up the card, we've got Ernesta Kareckaite versus short notice replacement and Regina Tarin, or Regina. I was going to pick maybe Sofia Montenegro in the original booking. But I'm going to go with Ernesta Kareckaite in this one. I watched Regina Tarin's fights, and she doesn't seem very good. Now, what's weird is I can only find her 3 most recent fights, and in all the fights, she looked pretty shit, especially on the feet. Like, she looked like I don't know who to make a comp to, but she looked very not technical, but kind of like, sharp with her punches. Not sharp, I get, but she looked like she was doing decent damage. And then I watched I think it was her second most recent fight against Caitlin O'Neill, which is an interesting fight because she threw a hook kick in the middle of the fight, and it hit her opponent, Caitlin O'Neill, right in she got her heel stuck in her top, and she ripped her, she exposed her breast during the fight. You could just watch this fight on YouTube, by the way, and go frame by frame if you don't believe me. But in that fight, she looked like her punches had literally zero power. She landed 25, maybe not 25, but a lot of unanswered strikes in the finishing sequence. With about a minute left in the second round, and the punches looked like they did no damage, and it was a visibly clear early stoppage, even though if it was most other fighters, it would be a very clear late stoppage. just because of the volume of the punches. But yeah, she doesn't have a ton of power, which is weird because almost all of her wins are finishes. But in her last fight, or not a lot, generally she doesn't look very good. But she looked good in the grappling in one of her more recent fights where she got a ground and pound TKO. But just generally she doesn't look like a very good fighter. And I think that because of this matchup, there's a very good chance this fight goes to a close decision. And Ernesta Kareckaite is very good at, well, maybe not very, she wins a lot of split decisions. She's 6-1 in her career, 6-1-1. I think she has 2 wins by finish and then 4 wins by decision, and all of her decision wins are split decisions. And the 2 times she had a unanimous decision, it was a unanimous draw and a unanimous loss. So I think generally when she goes to close fights, things go her way. She's won 4 of the 4 split decisions she's been a part of, including, over Carly Judice and a couple like not terrible fighters. So despite how, you could argue the decision against Carly Judice is a pretty bad decision, but she won the decision. I think that's a good look for her. And also Regina turns taking this fight on short notice. She isn't in incredible shape. There's a good chance she gasses. I know it is 125 or it's 130 I guess at a catch rate, but I know 125ers don't normally gas out, but if if she's gonna be forced to grapple to try to find an advantage, or if she's gonna be forced to look for a finish like she does in some of her other fights, then I think there's a chance that she does gas out. So I'll go with Kareckaite. Next fight up the card, Douglas Silva de Andrade versus Javier Reyes. I'm pretty torn on this one. I don't know how good Javier Reyes is. He's got one of those, I feel like a lot of South Americans, especially Brazilians and Mexicans, and I guess, maybe Colombians, have, weirdly deep resumes. They come to the UFC, he's coming on his debut now off the Contender Series. He's 22-5. That's almost 30 fights for a UFC debutant, which is pretty rare. Also, a lot of those guys, I'm thinking Diego Lopez is a similar one. A lot of the fighting nerds kind of the same thing, where they also have a weird amount of losses, kind of a lot. Javier Reyes has 5 losses, none of them to anyone that good, which isn't a very good look. But I did like how he looked in the Contender Series. I looked how he looked in his fight before the Contender Series. And Douglas Silva de Andrade is pretty old and washed. He's almost 41. He hasn't had a very clear win, good performance in a while. A lot of his fights are kind of similar to his fight he had with Miles Johns, which actually was his most recent fight. He hasn't fought since then, where both fighters are kind of slow, a little inaccurate, not landing with a ton of power, but every single exchange is oh, there could be a big left hook that lands here, or something, but it kind of never happens, and the fight's kind of boring. And I think that Javier Reyes is above that low accuracy, low power, low speed. Or maybe not low power. I think that Douglas Silva de Andrade tries to have power. It's just that I feel like Reyes isn't going to fall into that game of let's go tit for tat and throw 1 or 2 strike combinations at a time and have boring exchanges. I think he's going to be keeping the pressure on, throwing outside low kicks, throwing combos, feinting, throwing other combos, shit like that. So if he doesn't fall in that game, I think he has a pretty easy chance of winning. Next fight of the card, God, this fucking fight sucks so bad. Cristian Quiñonez versus Kris Moutinho. Both these guys shouldn't be in the UFC. Kris Moutinho is one of those New England cartel guys who's just in the UFC for, for fun, I guess. He's never going to win a fight. If it weren't for, if I just saw the O'Malley fight and even the Wellmaker fight, I might have been he has a good chance of beating Cristian Quiñonez. And I don't think he doesn't. I actually do think he has a good chance of winning just because Quiñonez is so bad and inactive. But his other loss in the UFC, Kris Moutinho, before the Wellmaker fight, before he got cut the first time, I'm pretty sure it was it Guido Canetti? I'm going to check real quick. It was Guido Canetti. He got finished in the first round by Guido Canetti, and I think if it were only the O'Malley fight I saw, I'd been this guy's durable. He's not technical. Him getting outclassed by O'Malley on short notice isn't that big of a deal, or it's not that big of a surprise, rather, is what I mean. So I wouldn't have mind picking him in that situation. But the Guido Canetti fight, him just getting walked down, beat up by a guy who's not very good at striking, not a very fast guy. I think Guido Canetti was 40 when they fought. He's not very good, and he finished him. He was landing everything at will, and he finished him early just because he was able to compound that damage over 2 minutes. And I don't think Cristian Quiñonez is very good. but I do think he's probably about as good as Guido Canetti was when he was, at the tail end of his UFC career. So I think I'll pick him. He is a minus 750 favorite, which is hilarious because if you watch this guy fight against, was it Hani Barcelos in his last fight, you wouldn't pick him to beat anyone. Literally, he looks so bad. He has a very bad flaw where he just leaves his lead foot like inside his like center of balance. So his lead leg is almost always available to be kicked at will. Hani Barcelos did it a ton. I'm pretty sure Kyung, the Korean guy he fought, the wrestler, I'm pretty sure he did kind of a similar thing. I don't really remember. So I think Moutinho will have a couple looks. Like, he probably will be able to take down Quiñonez if he looks for it. He probably will be able to leg kick him at will. So I don't think it's going to be a super easy win for Cristian Quiñonez. It's just that if he starts to like get any amount of damage going, I think he's just going to like snowball into a TKO finish, like a standing TKO. Especially when you consider that Wellmaker did just knock him out, like, was it just under a year ago? So yeah, I don't love Chris Moutinho to win any fights ever. So I'm going to pick Cristian Quiñonez. It's just, they're both so bad. It's funny that one of them has to win. Next we have the card, Macy Chiasson versus Ailín Pérez. I'm going to go with Ailín Pérez. Macy Chiasson lost her last two to Ketlen Vieira and Yana Santos by just being weaker in the clinch and being weaker in the grappling. I actually said before the Yana Santos fight, like, Macy Chiasson is a much better fighter, but I'm worried that Yana Santos is just going to do the Yana Santos thing, or the Yana Kunitskaya thing, and just hold her opponent and then win the fight. And that's exactly what she did. And Ailín Pérez has done that in a couple of her fights too. The Daria Železníková fight, she was doing that for most of the fight until she got the finish. The Jocelyn Edwards fight, she just had a lot of top control. So I think more of the same from Ailín Pérez, probably just a boring decision where she holds down Chiasson for 13 to 15 minutes. Next up the card, Jose Medina versus Ryan Gandra. I'm going Ryan Gandra. This is another one, was a giant favorite and a giant underdog. Minus 750 favorite, Ryan Gandra. I'm going with him. I don't think he's that good. The guy he fought in the Contender Series was kind of a bum. And he was also a minus 500 favorite for that. And I don't think he looked, I mean, I guess it's, he looked fine, but I don't know, just kind of a shit opponent. But then again, Jose Medina is another shit opponent. And I think Ryan Gandra is probably going to submit him in the first round. Jose Medina, not a very good grappler, not a very good fighter. He's just kind of one of those South American guys who has like the perfect chin and has a decent cardio. So you can imagine that he got some wins earlier in his career. But his last 5 fights, he had a split decision win against a 4-2 opponent, and then 4 consecutive losses in the UFC. Some of them against decent opponents. Atiba Gauthier did finish him with strikes. But like his last fight against Dusko Todorovic, getting submitted by him, not a very good look. Dusko, pretty past his prime and pretty bad to begin with. So I'm going to go with Ryan Gandra, just taking him down and submitting him right away, probably in the first 2 minutes. Next fight of the card, Santiago Luna versus Angel Pacheco. I'm going to go with Santiago Luna, another minus 750 favorite. He looked good against Kwang Lee. I didn't love him before. I don't love him now, but I didn't love his ability before he came in the UFC. I watched his fight before his debut. Who's it against? Desmond Manabet, maybe. It might have been him. 4-6 guy. And I didn't think he just looked like a professional fighter. Like, a lot of the stuff he did was kind of amateurish. Where he was leaving the clinch, where he was like getting out of grappling positions. And then also like some of his instincts didn't look great. And I was like, maybe he's young, but I think that Kwang Lee will beat him by just being a better, more clean fighter. And then he came out and whooped Kwang Lee. He dropped him twice and put him out cold. And I was like, oh, this guy actually is pretty good. He's pretty fast. His power actually, it isn't just power against bums who have already been knocked out 5 times. It's legitimate speed with legitimate power with decent technique, and he's a pretty solid fighter. And Angel Pacheco was kind of a fucking bum. He lost to Calvin Loughran, who went a little ethnic on the pronunciation there. Calvin Loughran, he not a very good fighter. He's been cuffed in the UFC. He lost to, I'm pretty sure, Jake Hadley. He lost to what's his name? The other guy from the Contender Series. I don't know. He lost to him too. I don't know. Whatever. Yeah, I'm gonna pick Santiago Luna. I just think he's a much better fighter. I think he's better than Calvin Loughran, and Loughran beat Pacheco. I just think Luna's probably gonna get a finish because he's got more power, he's got more speed than Loughran, and I think he's a little bit better at landing big strikes. So this would be cool. Like, honestly, he's one of the only fighters on this card so far that I think has a good future. I could see a couple of the guys being exciting contenders, or not even contenders, exciting like people that are outside the rankings. But Luna, if he wins this fight and looks really good, he's not very far from like a shot in the rankings against better competition. So next up the card, we got Imanol Rodriguez versus Kevin Borjas. I'm gonna go with Imanol Rodriguez. Kevin Borjas is not bad. I think he looked good against Ronaldo Rodriguez. But I think the reason why he looked good was because Ronaldo Rodriguez didn't move his head a ton. And what I will say is Imanol Rodriguez, not exactly like the head movement master. He's no Jose Aldo. He's no, Anderson Silva or anything. But he has a couple things that I do like. Like Sumo Darji, kind of the same thing. He didn't move his head a ton. He doesn't have like the best passive head movement. But Sumo Darji was giant against Kevin Borjas. He was way taller. And he had like a good amount of power and pop. Which is kind of kept Borjas at bay. It made Borjas keep following Sumo Darji but not committing to a lot of strikes. And Imanol Rodriguez is not as tall as Sumo Darji. He doesn't have the height and reach advantage that Sumo Darji did. He actually has a height and reach disadvantage, but he's really fast and he's got a lot of power. So I think there's going to be a similar sort of effect where Borjas will think he has an advantage in landing strikes because he's got the reach. But as soon as he gets peppered up a little bit by a guy who's much quicker, he's going to like change his ways and go back to the Sumo Darji fight where he was kind of complacent with being like a little bit behind in the striking, just because he was worried about getting hurt. So it'll be that. Imanol Rodriguez also a pretty good grappler. He trained with DC for the Ultimate Fighter. Solid fighter. I'm gonna pick him. He's another guy where I'm like, this guy could, make a run at flyweight. Obviously, we'll see. But I feel like flyweight is like the weight class of fraud checks. But I don't know. We'll see until he fights Charles Johnson or someone like that. I feel like he's actually he's a good enough prospect that I can confidently pick him to beat Kevin Borjas. Next up the card, Edgar Cháirez versus Felipe Bunes. Both these guys kind of a similar thing going on where they're kind of ugly records. They have a lot of like losses to not great fighters, but they looked pretty solid recently. Edgar Cháirez has been on a pretty decent run. It started with the Tatsuro Terra fight. He didn't look good at all in the Tatsuro Terra fight, but he was able to survive, and survive pretty well in a way that like a lot of better fighters weren't able to. Like Moreno wasn't able to survive. Royval was in worse position, stuff like that. So decent enough performance. And then he has the whole what's his name, Daniel Lacerda? Is that his name? Yeah, the Daniel Lacerda thing, where he's about to finish Daniel Lacerda with a submission, and then the ref stops the fight early, and Lacerda didn't tap, and he wasn't out. So they rebooked the fight, and then the fight got canceled because Lacerda got injured, and then they rebooked the fight again, and Cháirez missed weight, but it still goes on. He finally wins. And he clearly shows that he's like the better fighter than Lacerda. He shows that he's improved, but it takes like a year out of his, the prime of his career. And then he fights Joshua Van, and he loses to Van because Van's really good, but he does hurt Van real bad. He makes it close. It was a really good fight of the year candidate. And then he fought CJ Vergara, and he looked the best he's ever looked. He looked the most improved. He looked good on the feet. He looked good in the grappling. He gets the submission. And I just feel like Felipe Bunes, you see the similar resume, 14-8 versus 12-6. But when you look at like the individual fights, it's just way less impressive, especially recently. Felipe Bunes is losing to guys like Rafael Esteban, who's good. I don't hate that loss. He's also losing to Joshua Van, which is also like, that's a good fighter. Like, that's not a bad loss to have. But then you see his wins, and it's like, or even you look at the Van fight. He didn't have a competitive fight with Van where he drops and rocks him as a fight of the year contender. He got finished. And then you look at the Esteban fight. It wasn't very competitive. And then his wins are against like Jose Johnson. And that wasn't a very good win. And that's his UFC career. So it's like, I don't know. Compared to Cháirez, I think Cháirez has a much better resume. Looked much better in the fights that he lost. And has looked less improved recently. Like, I don't think he's on the way up as a 36-year-old. Whereas I think Cháirez is on the way up as a 30-year-old. So maybe on the way up, but definitely at his peak. If not on the way up. So yeah, I'm going to go with Cháirez. Probably by decision. But if he's looking as improved, if he improves between last fight and this fight as much as he did between last fight and the fight before that, I could definitely see him getting a finish. But with the Terra thing, Felipe Bunes, his one win in the UFC came from like out grappling and kind of scaling Jose Johnson, who's a giant flyweight, and getting the submission, which I was a little worried about because Edgar Cháirez also kind of a lanky, long flyweight. Maybe he's scalable, maybe he can get armbarred. But the fact that he didn't get submitted by Tatsuro Terra makes me think he's probably not going to get submitted by Felipe Bunes. So I'm going to go with Edgar Cháirez for sure. Next fight of the card, Daniel Zellhuber versus King Green, or Bobby Green. I'm going to go with Zellhuber. I think the odds are way off. Same last couple Bobby Green fights, the odds have been a little weird. He's kind of being underrated by Vegas. But yeah, the last time I saw odds this similar where it was the Mauricio Huffy fight. I feel like it's kind of a similar scenario. I don't think Zellhuber's nearly as good as Mauricio Huffy, but he does have kind of or he can take advantage of kind of a flaw that Bobby Green has in his striking recently. Like since the Jalen Turner fight, I'm thinking mainly in the Mauricio Huffy fight, when he's fighting a guy with a lot of power, he's given them a lot more respect recently than he has before. Even in his last fight that he won, he was like way more hesitant to he wasn't doing what he did against Jim Miller, where walks right in the guy's face and gets right in his grill and bites them. And even then, kind of against Jim Miller, he was there's a couple moments where he looked chinny, he looked like he was easy to hurt, he was kind of afraid to engage. And in the Mauricio Huffy fight, he took that to an extra level. He let Mauricio Huffy basically kick at him at will. He wasn't countering kicks. He wasn't trying to grapple at all. And then he was really hesitant to exchange at all. He was terrified of that power of Mauricio Huffy. And like I said, that allowed for him to be kicked at will. And then Mauricio Huffy throws a big kick and it lands clean and it knocks him out. And I don't think Zellhuber's going to get a fucking wheel kick, head kick, knockout. But I do think that he's probably going to have, I don't know, he also doesn't have the power of Mauricio Huffy, but I think he's got enough power and enough reach where Bobby Green's constantly going to be worried about getting chinned by a big punch, kind of like he did against Jalen Turner. And that's going to make him similarly complacent and reluctant to exchange a lot, which I think is going to lead to him getting kicked a ton. I think he's going to get leg kicked and body kicked and head kicked a ton. And I think Zellhuber is just going to take it patiently, kind of like he did with the Michael Johnson fight. But in this fight, he's the guy with more power, so he's got less to worry about. He doesn't have to be the hesitant one. He doesn't have to fight a perfect fight. He's just got to land a couple big strikes and find a finish. And Bobby Green is very chinny, and he's more hittable now than ever. So I'm going to go with Zellhuber. Next up the card, we got the co-main event, Marlon Vera versus David Martinez. I'm going to go with David Martinez. Marlon Vera has not looked the man that he used to be. Yeah, I'm going to go with David Martinez. He looks hotter than ever. He looked pretty solid in his last fight. Not the best performance, but, clean, decision win. It was kind of a weird thing where the bell went off to signal the fight was over, but it was during a finishing sequence for Martinez, and Murgulata didn't hear the bell, so he just let the fight go for an extra 10 seconds and then called it off as a TKO 5 minutes and 10 seconds into the 5-minute round. So that's a little, but he still got the win. He still looked really good the whole time. And one thing that I said about David Martinez is he would have similar success in the striking against Rob Font that Jose Aldo did. And he kind of did. A lot of the success he had was in those quick, especially the finishing sequence. He kind of caught Rob Font off guard with his speed, especially that late in the fight, and he caught him with a big punch, and it kind of dropped Rob Font down to the turtle, and he just got ground and pounded to a late finish. And Marlon Vera is another guy who fought Jose Aldo and was just outclassed by his speed and his ability to counter, that ability to switch on. And that's also how Marlon Vera got dropped by Davis Figueiredo, is he wasn't fully switched on. He thought he was, a stride away, and that was far enough for a guy smaller than him. But Figueiredo came up on the top with a big right hand and dropped Marlon Vera. And I think that Martinez will do a similar thing. I think he's going to get a finish. I think Marlon Vera's kind of, I don't know if he got knocked out in training or something or what. I know he's always afraid of gassing out. But his recent fights, he's been very, very low volume. And that is the perfect fight. I mean, if you want to go back and re-listen to what I said for Martinez against Rob Font, the game plan I laid out for him was you want to counter with big strikes. You want to lower the volume, and you want to, the lower the volume of the fight is, with your speed and power advantage as Martinez, you're going to win the fight more and more often the lower the volume is, just because your strikes are faster and hit harder, and they're usually counters, so they're going to hit their opponent when they're not, they don't see the punch coming. And that's exactly what he needs to do against Marlon Vera. So, kind of a similar game plan. Probably a little bit less worried about exchanging the pocket, maybe a little bit more worried about the grappling. But I'm not that worried at all for Martinez. I think this is a pretty, as far as a matchup, style-wise, I think this is probably maybe the best matchup for him. Maybe other than Eamon Zahabi or someone like that. But yeah, I think we're going to get a good performance from David Martinez, and I think that Martinez is going to be a top guy at bantamweight. Mid-Mexico is actually going to have a decent prospect on the way up rather than on the way down. So main event time, yeah. Brandon Moreno versus Loner Kavanagh, or Lonnie, or however you fucking pronounce it. I'm going to go with Brandon Moreno. Mostly due to circumstance. I think that Loner Kavanagh is a good fighter, but a good fighter with not a very good gas tank, and a good fighter who's never fought 5 rounds in the UFC, and a good fighter who, is taking this fight on short notice. So that's kind of what it comes down to. Like, I think Loner Kavanagh is a very good fighter. We saw it in the first round of the Charles Johnson fight. He looked better than anyone really looked against Charles Johnson until he got to that second round and the body kick started to wear on, and he started to slow down. And then every exchange he would have success by being quick and being powerful, and then he would have the opposite of he would have a failure because he would start to slow down and he was starting to gas and he wasn't being as diligent with his defense and stuff. That's how the fight ended. He won an exchange, or he had an exchange rather, and then he goes to back out and he's tired, so he keeps his hands low, and Charles Johnson hits him right in the chin and finishes him. And I don't think Moreno's going to finish him super easily, but I have seen Moreno fight against Brandon Royval and fight against Steve Erceg and have very high output, voluminous fights against strikers where he's striking the entire time, going tit for tat, and he didn't gas out in any of those fights. And I saw Loner Kavanagh gas out after 1 round on a full training camp against Charles Johnson, and this fight's 5 rounds. So, and also Brandon Moreno, he's got the body kicks. He doesn't use the teeps like Charles Johnson. Obviously, he doesn't have the height and reach for that, but we saw him finish Kai Kara-France with a hard body kick right in the liver. So I think it's openings like that we're going to see a lot of after the first round, after the second round, and then getting into rounds 4 and 5, it's going to be, nightmare for Loner Kavanagh. Assuming he doesn't finish Moreno, which I think he totally can. Moreno did take a good amount of damage his last fight, arguably an early stoppage, but he did get, like 5 or 6 full wind-up, ground-and-pound shots from Tatsuro Terra. That wasn't, was it December, November? Yeah, it was 2 months ago. So maybe his chin's a little weak or something. Loner Kavanagh has the power to finish guys. He hasn't done it in the UFC against he didn't do it against Jose Ochoa, didn't do it to Alessandro Costa, didn't do it to Charles Johnson. We've seen Charles Johnson get finished before. We've seen Alessandro Costa get hurt before. Moreno is an echelon above those guys, especially when you're taking the fight on short notice. So I'm going to go with him. So let me know if you agree or disagree with my predictions. Like the video, share the video, comment. If you want to hear more about a certain fight or a fighter or whatever, you can also check me out on Twitter. Link is in the description. I'll be live tweeting the event and all future events. And you can also reach out to me there if you want to hear more about something. That is all. I'll be back next week with, the the pay-per-view predictions and the prison predictions. I might make a recap of this event if something controversial happens or if it's entertaining or whatever. So subscribe if you want to see that stuff. And thank you for listening.